Hungarian Folk Tales. The Lad Who Watched Over the Rabbits. Once upon a time, very long ago, and far away, there lived a king, and the king had a daughter, so beautiful that even the painters could not paint her beauty. Now there came a time for her to take a husband, and the king said that he would give her in marriage to the man who could catch the apple she threw among them. So they came together, the princes and the dukes, the counts and the gypsy lads, to catch the apple. But try as they would, not one of them succeeded. But one day who should turn up but a village lad? Once again the princess flung the apple, and the lad caught it as if it had been thrown straight to him. But the king was not overjoyed at this, that a come-and-go-as-he-pleases lad was to be his son-in-law. Well then, young fellow, I don't know what kind of lad you are to catch the apple, but there's another trial in store for you. I have rabbits aplenty, and you have to watch over them. If you can watch them carefully, well and good, but if you can't, then it's off with your head. Now the lad was downcast to hear that he had to watch over the rabbits, for never before had he been a watcher of rabbits. And all of a sudden, an old woman appeared. She said, "Don't be downcast, young fellow. I shall give you a whistle, and when you go off to the meadow, all you have to do is blow it, and you'll see how useful it will be." Then they let the rabbits out, and they ran off in 1,000 directions. The lad blew his whistle, and the rabbits lined up like soldiers on parade. The king looked out and wondered what kind of lad could keep the rabbits in devilish good order. So the king said to his daughter, "Listen, daughter dear, dress yourself up as a poor young woman and take a satchel with you to the meadow and ask the lad for a rabbit, so that in the evening when he brings them home, there'll be one rabbit missing." So the princess dressed herself up in the clothes of a poor young woman, put a satchel under her arm, and went out to the meadow. "Good day to you, good rabbit herd. God save you. What brings you here, young lady?" "I'm not a lady. I'm just a poor young girl. I came to see if you could give me a rabbit." "Of course I can," he said, "if your highness will give me a kiss." "I'm not a princess," said she. And she was really fierce in denying it because she didn't want the lad to know who she was. But he knew which way the wind was blowing. "Well, just one kiss and I'll give you a rabbit." So the princess thought for a moment, to kiss or not to kiss, but in the end, she gave him a kiss. Right away the lad took hold of a rabbit and put it in the satchel for her. So she set off home. But she hadn't got halfway home when the lad blew the whistle again, and the rabbit jumped out of the satchel and scampered back to him. The princess got home, and the king said to her, "Well, did you get a rabbit?" She looked in the satchel and, sure enough, there was nothing in it at all. So she said to her father, "I tried and I asked, but he didn't give me a rabbit," because she was ashamed to say that she had given him a kiss. So the king said, "Never mind, I'll try." So the king dressed up as a poor country lad and took a satchel, and off he went on a donkey to the meadow where the village lad was to be found. When he got there, he said, "God save you, young fellow. How goes it with you?" "Well enough," said the lad. "I have the rabbits to watch over. Have pity on me, young fellow, and give me a rabbit, for I'm as poor can be, and sick, and I need the meat of a rabbit to give me strength." "Willingly," said the lad, "if you kiss the tail of your donkey." So the king thought for a moment, and in the end he kissed the tail of the donkey. Well then, the lad gave him a rabbit. The king took the satchel under his arm and sat astride the donkey. But he hadn't got halfway home when the lad blew that whistle of his, and the rabbit jumped out of the satchel and left it as empty as the day is long. The king got home, opened the satchel, and saw not a rabbit there at all. The princess asked him, "Father dear, did you bring a rabbit?" "Of course I didn't bring one. He wouldn't give me one." Evening came, and the king looked out of the window to see how the lad had lined up the rabbits to come home. Like soldiers on parade, in they came, and all of them present and correct. "Well done, young fellow," said the king. "You've done a very good job. You've passed the test. Now there's one more for you, and if you pass that too, then you'll have my daughter as your wife. Now I want you to tell me as many lies as will fit in a sack." So the lad began to think about what lies he could tell. All the king's councillors sat around in a circle with the lad in the middle, and he started to tell lies. Well, he lied and lied about anything and everything that came into his head. But the king called out, "The sack's not full yet. Carry on with your lying." So he carried on. "Well, you know, when I was looking after the rabbits, the princess came to me and asked for a rabbit and gave me a kiss in return. Well, didn't the princess grow as red in the face as a rose in bloom? She couldn't get over her shame. And after that," said the lad, "the king himself came and I told him to kiss the donkeys." "It's full," shouted the king. "You don't have to say another word. A big sack full of lies." So the lad didn't say another word. And that's how the king gave his daughter to the lad, who watched over the rabbits. Together they lived happily and peacefully. And when the king died, the lad became king. His kingdom was so blessed that it's a pity he isn't still living today. And that's the end of my story. Hungarian Folk Tales. Martin and the Cursed Princess. Once upon a time, there was a poor man who had 3 sons. The youngest son's name was Martin. When the boys grew up, their father turned to them and said, "Well, boys, you've had enough to eat at home, and now you're old enough and strong enough to work. 1 year from now, I want you each to return home with a suit of clothes. Off you go, and may God bless you all." The boys did as they were told, and they started their journey. After a while, they reached a huge old tree. At this point, the road forked into 3 directions. The boys said goodbye to each other, and each of them started walking down a different path. As Martin walked along, he reached a forest. A huge, warty frog was approaching him and spoke to Martin. "I know you're looking for a job. Come on, work for me, and you won't be sorry. All you have to do is chop and saw some wood. Plus put me to bed in the evenings and raise me out of bed in the mornings. Well, what do you say? I'm your man. Wherever I have to work, it's all the same." So he shook the frog's hand and stayed. A whole year passed by. The frog was not a bad employer at all. On the last day it said, "Well, Martin, you've done a good job. Your brothers are taking their new clothes home. But never mind, just go into the pantry and pick whatever you like. Martin selected a nice suit of clothes and started on his return journey homewards. At the old tree, he met his brothers again. Well, who employed you, Martin? But as soon as Martin told that he was employed by a frog, the boys nearly fell over laughing. But when they saw his new suit of clothes, they all stopped laughing. They grew yellow with envy. After they got home, they stayed home for a while, but when spring came, their father once again spoke to them. Well, boys, it's time for you to be working again. But this time, tell your masters to pay you with wine. The boys did as they were told. When they got to the tree, they said goodbye again, and each went on his way. The frog was already there in the forest. Come and work for me, Martin. Your job will be as easy as it was the last time. Martin was already used to the frog, and he didn't mind working at all. When the new year was up, the frog told him, "Hey, Martin, your brothers are already busy carrying their wine home. Never mind anything. Go, find a bottle and walk down into the cellar. Fill it up with the wine you like the best." So the year went by, and the boys met once again at the crossroads. Both brothers were rolling a sizable barrel as they went. When they spotted Martin, they couldn't help laughing at him. "Well, that frog master of yours is not a generous employer. All he ever gave you was this miserable little bottle." Martin didn't say anything. He rolled out the largest barrel and poured the wine into it. "Maybe a smaller barrel will be more appropriate," they mocked at him. But it didn't last for long, because when they saw that the bottle was simply not running out of wine, they were so astonished that their eyes bulged out. Their amazement grew when they tasted it. They rested at home for a while, but then their father sent them off to work again. "Now you have clothes and you have wine of your own, and you are ready to get married. But you have to find a wife." The boys did like before, and when they got to the fork in the road, they said goodbye to each other once again. Martin went to see his frog, and the two elder brothers went their own way, whatever it was. The frog told Martin, "Well, Martin, this time it's not going to be as easy as before. This time you will have to chop and stack up 3 times as much wood as last year." When the year was over, the frog told Martin, "You've done a good job again, but now you have to be very careful. Gather up my bed linen and take it to the top of that wood stack. Then carry me up and place me on the top of the stack." Martin did as he was told and finally placed the frog on top of the pile of wood. Then he heard the frog call down from the top of the wood, "All right, now go, find a broom, then set the wood stack on fire, and as soon as the wood catches fire, you will see frogs leaping towards the fire from all sides. You must sweep all of them up into the fire, but beware, don't let any of them get away, because that would mean great trouble." Martin begged the frog to come down from the top of the pile, but the frog didn't listen. In the end, he had no choice. He had to set fire to the stack of wood. There was a lot of panic and commotion. There were so many frogs, Martin could hardly sweep them all onto the fire. By nightfall, the fire burned down. The frogs were all lost, including Martin's frog master. Martin was very, very sad. He was still full of sorrow when he fell asleep. The next morning, when he opened his eyes, he saw a beautiful maiden standing next to his bed. "Martin, thank you for saving me. I had to live as a frog with all my household until an honest lad came along and did everything as I told him. But now you have removed the curse." Martin's heart beat loudly when he saw her. The princess jumped into his arms and said, "Your brothers are going home with their wives, but don't you worry. Go down to the courtyard and bring the horses to the best carriage. By the time they get home, we'll be there before them." And so it happened. There was great astonishment and a lot of envy. But Martin was a good brother. He gave each of his brothers 3 sacks full of gold. Then he married the princess and went off to rule as a king. Maybe he could have found himself a better job, but he had no reason to complain, did he now? Hungarian Folk Tales. The Man with the Heart of Stone. Once upon a time, in a distant land beyond the hills, there lived a poor old woman who had 3 handsome sons. One day the young men decided to set out in search of maidens from other lands to take as wives, for in their village they found not a single one to their liking. And as they ambled and rambled, their path took them through a vast forest, where they saw a small cottage and went inside. "Blessings of the Lord on you, old man," said the youths. "Would you give us lodging for the night?" "I will gladly give you lodging." So the young men stayed for the night, and in the morning the old man said, "Good men, your path has brought you to me, and when you return, it will bring you to my home again. I gave you shelter, and in return I ask that you bring me a beautiful maiden whom I can take to be my wife." The 3 young men thought, "A young maiden for this old man? The greybeard can barely hobble along." But they kept these thoughts to themselves and tried to hide their laughter. The 3 youths travelled to distant lands as they had planned and entered into the service of the king. The king had 3 beautiful, strong daughters. The youths served so well and fought so bravely that the king grew fond of them. So he gave them his daughters to be their wives. With great joy, the youths brought their wives home, but on their way, they had to cross through the vast forest where the old man lived. When they came to his cottage, they greeted him. "Blessings of the Lord on you, old man. Blessings of the Lord on you. You were gone for a long time. I see you have found yourselves lovely wives. But where, pray tell, is my maiden to wed?" The young men said, "We did not bring you a maiden to wed." "You did not bring me a maiden to wed? Then I will turn you all to stone, and only one maiden will remain to be my wife." And as he spoke, the young man and the 2 girls turned to stone. One maiden remained, whom he kept by his side. She swept, cooked, and cried all day. One day the old man was in very high spirits. The maiden said to him, "Kind old man, why did you turn them to stone?" "Because my heart is made of stone too." "And where is your stone heart?" "It is there, between the bed sheets." The old man left the cottage and went wandering in the forest. The maiden picked dozens of flowers and wove a beautiful garland, which she placed on the bed. In the evening, when the old man returned, he began to laugh and cackle. "Why did you put that garland on the sheets?" "Because I wanted your stone heart to know joy, so I made a lovely garland." The old man laughed heartily. "I can see you are a kind-hearted girl. You thought my stone heart was in the bedsheets, did you not? Ah, but it is not." "Then tell me where it is, kind old man," the maiden pleaded. "Listen closely. In the middle of the vast forest, there is a huge rock, and in the rock there is a little bird, and my heart is in that little bird. If someone smashes the rock, catches the bird, and takes from it my heart, then I will have my heart again." The girl sank into thought. "Oh Lord, what man can do that?" Many years passed, and the poor old woman was still waiting for her 3 sons to return home. She thought surely they had died, and another son was born to her, and he grew up to a boy 12 years of age. "Dear mother," he said one day, "do I have neither brothers nor sisters?" With great sorrow in her voice, the old woman told him that he had had 3 brothers, and they had travelled to distant lands in search of maidens to marry, but they had never returned. "Well," he said, "prepare me for the trip, and I will set out to find them." The poor woman gave her youngest son food for the trip, and, weeping bitter tears, she bid him farewell. He set out on his way, and after he had travelled far, he sat down to eat and said, "Anyone who is hungry, come join me." Suddenly a ram with tremendous horns on its head came out from the forest. "You summoned me, young man. I am here." The young man treated the ram to a feast. And when they had eaten their fill, the ram said, "Take a hair of mine, and should you find yourself in danger, I will come to your aid." The young man continued on his way and eventually sat down to eat once more and said, "Is there anyone here? For I have a little food left." And a dove alighted on his shoulder. "Come and eat with me. Take a feather of mine, and should you find yourself in danger, I will come to your aid." The young man continued on his way, and he eventually found himself at the cottage where the stone-hearted man lived. So he knocked on the door, but the man wasn't at home, only his wife. "Good evening, and what brings you to this distant place, young man?" The young man replied, "I set out to see distant lands, and you? Do you live alone in this little cottage?" "I am not alone," replied the maiden. "An old man lives here too, but now he's wandering in the forest." And then the maiden spoke of her grief, of the men and the maidens turned to stone statues, and she also spoke of how the old man could get his heart back. The young man set out to find the great rock, and when he came upon it, he sighed, "If only that battering ram were here, he would smash this rock for me." And magically the ram appeared and butted the rock once, twice with his tremendous horns and smashed it to pieces. "Now all I need is the dove to catch the little bird," he sighed, and magically the dove alighted again on his shoulder, and there and then it caught the little bird. The youth took it in his hand and returned to the cottage, and as he approached, the old man said to the maiden, "Oh, my dear girl, I do not know what is happening to me, but I feel great warmth, and my chest seems to beat again." And as the youth drew close to the cottage, the old man began to shed tears. "Old man, I bring you back your heart." The old man put the heart of the little bird where his heart once had been, and it beat again as it had beaten before. Then the maiden spoke, "Now, old man, bring those statues back to life. Let them know joy again." The old man brought them back to life. They paid him thanks, embraced one another, and set off homeward bound. They celebrated with a huge wedding feast, and they all lived happily ever after.